One of the most frequently asked questions I get is to talk about my own personal spiritual awakening, when it happened, how it happened, and so on. I was at dinner the other night with a girlfriend and I was telling her, she's having one right now, and I was telling her about mine, and she said, "Have you ever shared that story?" And I said, "No, I think there's less than a handful of people that know that." And she looked at me and she said, "Girl, it's time." So here's the video. I guess I've never shared my story in a larger group of people or really to anyone outside of my super small inner group because it happened to me when I was so young. I didn't know what was happening at the time, and God forbid I be going through something strange, weird, different, and that would make me feel even more separate and left out than I already felt. You see, my childhood was pretty difficult. I mean, unlike a lot of people, I did not grow up in the most harmonious home. And I had my own things going on where I always felt different. I always felt, because of my spiritual abilities and high sensitivity, I felt like no one can really get me. No one's really getting my experience. So I already felt different and like I'm in a world that is like somewhere else, functions differently. Oh, sorry about my lighting. Sorry, trying to figure it out. But I always felt that anyway. So I was 15 years old and I was going to a youth group convention in Atlanta from Chicago. We were all traveling there together with, 12 kids from my church. And we were going to be in Atlanta with 2,000 other kids who came together for a higher purpose. So I can remember the day perfectly as if it happened yesterday. We got to Atlanta, we got to our rooms where we were staying, and the next day was my 16th birthday. And we all got together in the morning in this huge dome to basically have a church service, basically hear from pastors and people in the spiritual community that wanted to talk to us about God. And what was incredible is I remember at some point after they started talking with all my friends, with kids that I haven't met too, it was very cool to all feel connected for a higher purpose. I remember looking up at the screens. They had these big screens that the pastor would be projected onto so that everyone in the dome could see them and hear them. And at one point I just felt really light, and I was looking up as if like blissed out in a way. And I was looking up at the screen and I saw myself looking back at me. And at first I was like, wow, that's weird. Is everyone seeing themselves? That's so cool. And then I looked at the pastor and it was me. And then I looked at some of my friends and it was me looking back at me. And I had this moment of like, yeah, we are all one. It was this awareness that dropped into me that there is no separation. We are all the same. My friend is me. The pastor is me. Strange. And at that moment, I could see everyone in that dome, 2,000 people at the same time. And I thought, am I flying? This is strange. And as soon as I had any doubt about it, I dropped back in, and it was like, that didn't happen. And so I remember looking to my friend and saying, "Did you just see me everywhere?" And she said, "No, I see you right here though." And I said, "Oh my God, did it not happen?" So as you can imagine, that was a very intense experience for a new 16-year-old to comprehend. But the feeling and the awareness I had when something I felt dropped in, this awareness dropped in that you are everyone is you. You are all the same. You are all connected. You are not separate. And you can see everything at once as if everything is you and you are everything. it was this extreme light feeling, this feeling of bliss, being blissed out. And I was so excited to have the awareness that I'm not separate, which is something I grew up with that was really painful for me. I wasn't separate. I wasn't different. I wasn't sort of less or more or right or wrong. It just felt like we were all the same. So I didn't tell anyone about that experience other than my one friend, because I thought, okay, let's keep that to ourselves. That's a little weird. And that night was so amazing. There was this party because it was just celebrating everyone coming together for this event. And my friends from church had dedicated a song to me for my 16th birthday, Staying Alive. And I remember just this blissful feeling of feeling so alive. That was it. That's how I felt. I felt like this complete synchronicity, like the universe knows what I'm feeling. And that's why they dedicated that song to me, because this feeling is unlike anything I had ever had. And I just felt like I'm awake. I'm alive. Like I understand that there is no separation. Now, cut to, I'm 16 years old. I go back to Chicago from my beautiful, enlightening experience in Atlanta that I couldn't tell anyone about. For sure, I'm not telling my parents because they already think I'm weird and different. So I'm not telling them this, but they're obviously going to be able to tell that something's different about me because I'm feeling real interesting. So I start having all these like crazy synchronicities. I'm driving in the car literally the next week with my friend Megan. And I tell her, you know what? I think I want to be a model. Just as something that came to me. I think I want to do that. I want to travel the world. I want to self-express. I want to embody the creative expression of what an artist, a photographer, a client has. I feel like I would be really good at that. I feel like I can really tune into things like this, emotions and creative expression. So as I'm telling her this, she goes, yeah, you definitely need to do that. And on the radio in the car is an advertisement for a Model Search America happening at the hotel on our left, the Hilton, that night in 15 minutes. And I said, Megan, really? This is a sign. And she looks at me, she goes, whoa, like, did you just create that? It was so, like, manifesting like this. It was nuts. And the synchronicity was so beautiful and so undeniable. And I said, I don't know who created it or not, but I feel like it's meant to be. Let's go. I'm going to have to show up like this. I think I was wearing jean shorts and like sandals and I don't know. I had no photos on me, but I was like, whatever, let's go. So we go. And we're sitting in this big room with a bunch of wannabe models, all of us. Like, yeah, okay, there's a bunch of girls, a bunch of guys. They're going to pick some of us to go to New York to meet the big agents. And I got chosen that night. And I thought, wow, maybe I'm right. Maybe this is my path. So we go back to school. And this is the part that I think is most important about the awakening, because it doesn't stick if you have any doubt. So I think it's really important to realize that, you know, us in the spiritual community always say your vibe attracts your tribe, but your tribe really dictates your vibe as well. And when you're young and you're just figuring this stuff out, it's extremely important to realize that the energy around you, the collective energy, which a lot of times we don't have any control over, right? It can sway you until you're totally sure of you and rooted in your true self. Now, I had just had a taste at my 16th birthday of my truth, my true authentic self, that feeling of oneness, that feeling of love and not fear. There was no fear into me. And when there was fear that came in, it started to doubt this experience, is when it dropped out. And so I was still vibing high because I was just around a huge group of amazing people that were really in the zone, I would say. So now I'm back at school and good things continue to happen, and I continue to feel this new confidence, this is who I am feeling, instead of, you know, as teenagers, it's a lot about figuring out who you are by other people's opinions and by what happens. I started really feeling like this is who I am and I'm creating, I'm manifesting. And it was such a different reality from what I had been used to. And so really good things were happening. And all of a sudden, one of my old fears dropped in because I started feeling around me that there was some jealousy, that there was some negativity, that there was some betrayal happening. I felt people saying things that I couldn't understand. And at that age, I remember just having fear, like, oh no, is this good feeling wrong? Is this awareness that I just had wrong? Is it being taken away from me? Why can't I get rid of or block myself from this negative energy that I'm feeling? Which, in high school, you just start modeling people are jealous. You just things like this. I didn't realize that's what it was. I felt maybe the universe is telling me that all these things I feel like I've just learned, I don't deserve or aren't real. Or maybe there's something wrong with me that I can't hold on to it. What was it? And so I let this fear feeling come in and take over me. And I tried so hard to keep it at bay and block it and deny it, which is all the things I teach now not to do because I had to learn through my experience. But I felt that high, that bliss, that connection leaving. And my old fear-based, feeling separate self was like struggling to not be that. I was struggling to keep this new awareness. I didn't know how to do it alone because my collective environment was no longer this high vibing consciousness. I'm back in high school with egos flying and hormones flying and everyone not knowing who they are flying around, and I couldn't hold it on my own. And I felt like, why was I given this gift if I'm not going to be able to keep it? So what happened next is really why I do the work that I do today. What happened next was I had this extreme awakening that I then started denying. I then started doubting. I then started fearing because I didn't know how to deal with what was happening, and I blamed myself. I didn't know how to get that back, and I thought I was responsible to get it back since I had been given this awareness. This is what I now call spiritual perfectionism, where we think we got to get it right and perfect if we have an awareness. And the truth is, what I would do now differently is I would have allowed those fears to come in and chosen differently. I now would understand that what was coming in was not a force greater than me, but the collective energy around me. And we have the ability to click in with what I call the wise guide inside, that awareness, that feeling of oneness, that feeling of love, that feeling of truth, and choose that regardless of our surroundings. And this is what I teach in my courses now. It's about unconditionality, living as your true self regardless of your conditions, regardless of the vibes around you. Now, something else that I did that was really smart at the time that I actually wasn't happy about having to do, I quit a lot of the things I was involved in. I quit my gymnastics, violin, piano, soccer. I quit all of my activities, and I joined a group that I felt had my back, that I felt support in, that I felt community. And this is, I won't go into the rest of the story. There's a lot of negative things I had to go through because of this self-doubt, because of this deep pain that came from doubting something so truthful and real, because no one else around me had the experience. I was alone, again, in something beautiful, but alone and separate because I couldn't share it with any of my peers. No one understood it. They loved hearing about it. My little group of friends that I would teach and talk about auras and spiritual stuff, they loved it and they saw me, which was so important. And I allowed them to see me in that way. So I felt very validated, but I still felt alone and different. And that led me into eventually learning and healing so many of these fears and so many of these childlike misperceptions and so many of these wounds into these wisdoms that I teach about. Our wounds are the part of us that still feels separate. I had to look at every part of those because what I learned also in this journey was things weren't just happening to me. The things that were occurring in my environment that were bringing out my fear, bringing out my doubt, were the parts of me that needed to be cleared and healed so that that doubt and fear wouldn't be attracted from inside out. Instead, I could create more of an environment in my universe, in my world, that reflected my truth, that reflected the purity within me, because all these doubts and fears were being attracted so that I could look at them and say, that's not me. I no longer own that. That's not me. I no longer want to attract that. That's not me. I no longer believe I deserve that. So, I believe if you're waking up to this, you're going to see that the brighter the light, the darker the shadow. When you wake up to your spiritual center, you may have some experiences that don't reflect that scare you, that make you have doubt. Embrace these. It's not telling you you should doubt yourself. It's telling you these are the parts of yourself that still have doubt, the parts of yourself that still have doubt. Your outer reality reflects your inner reality. Your outer experience reflects your inner reality. So as soon as we change these inner realities, we look at these parts of ourselves that are scary or doubtful, we get to choose, we get to upgrade, we get to say, oh, that's my old vibration. Now I know a deeper truth, and I'm going to apply that deeper truth, not doubt that deeper truth, to the reality I'm seeing. A beautiful example of this would be something happens in your environment that makes you feel an old pain. It triggers you. It makes you feel uncertain. It makes you feel off your game. It makes you feel afraid to be authentic, afraid to speak your mind, afraid to own your beliefs. This is basically telling you where there's weakness in your link, weakness in your vibration that needs to be practiced. So what you do is you say, oh, most people say, oh, it's true. I'm afraid of this about myself. This is what I feel. This is what I fear. No. Notice what you feel and choose differently. Does this still feel scary? If so, why? Don't be afraid, but look at it. The more authentic we are with our feelings and ourselves, the more connected we stay. What disconnects us from our higher self, from our energetic vortex, from our global consciousness, our conscious sort of abilities, is the fear and the doubt. To fear what we feel and doubt what we experience. If we just say, wow, I'm feeling this fear, and we allow it to be. See, what I did as a teenager is I was afraid to allow that feeling because I thought it would take me off my game. But what I learned is by denying these parts of ourselves that we think aren't enough, or we think are doubtful, or we think aren't lovable, or are separate, by doubting it, we're keeping it separate. By allowing it and saying, wow, I actually feel that way. That's in me. How can I shift this? We shift it by seeing it and loving it, and shifting it by upgrading our beliefs about ourselves, upgrading our separation beliefs into more of a collective belonging. I feel like many of us are having spiritual awakenings at younger and younger ages because it's about learning to teach the rest of us, learning from our own experiences. As I teach, I get to learn even deeper. As I teach, I get to anchor even harder and stronger and feel even more awakened. And so we're being awakened so that we can awaken ourselves and then serve as a light for others as they go through this journey. There's nothing to fear about what you feel. There's only something to look at. So I hope this makes sense. I'll be sharing more about my journey later because I feel like more and more people keep asking me. And I think it's time. And I think we can handle it. And I think more and more of us are relating to it. So we won't feel weird by sharing our truth. So I hope this makes sense to you guys. Please share if there's anyone else you know going through this so we can continue this authentic thread of conversation. And please subscribe if you haven't already. Check the links below and I'll see you next week. Namaste.